Hi guys, I'm Peyton, and I just wanted to say thank you for all the support because I am blown away. I pre-filmed and uploaded my first 3 videos, so this is the first video that I'm filming since seeing the reaction to my channel, and let me just say, I would have been grateful for 10 views on my first video, but I got over 500 on my first one, and then over 1,000 on my second one, so my mind is blown. I could not be more grateful, and I just wanted to say thank you before we got into the video. Alright, let's talk about masking, specifically autistic masking. So I will put the definition on screen, but if I had to define it in my own words, I would say that it is a mostly subconscious trauma response to constantly being told that your natural way of being is wrong or incorrect. So it's not something that every autistic person wants to do or even can do, but it's something that a lot of us do. And it's a huge reason why a lot of us go underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed. I would also like to add that masking is like in the diagnostic manual, like it's in the DSM-5 under traits of autism. So it's not some BS that the autistic community is making up or some shit. Like, this is an actual thing that autistic people do. There are so many examples of masking. There's no way that I could give you every single example right here, but some examples that I can relate to, because again, I can only speak on my own personal experience, and it's going to be different every person to person, every autistic person to every autistic person, every neurodivergent person to every neurodivergent person. So some examples of autistic masking that I personally experience would be scripting, for sure. I will script out conversations in my head days, weeks, months, years in advance. And by the time I actually get to the conversation, it's usually very different, and people obviously don't stick to the script that I have in my head because they don't even know that I have one in my head. Like, they're just having a conversation, but I can't just like naturally do that, especially when I'm around new people in an uncomfortable environment. I'm just super panicky and frozen and not able to process very well. So that's why I try to have this script in my head ahead of time, so that I have something to reference so that I can respond in a neurotypical way, so I'm not just standing there like frozen trying to process for 5 minutes to actually get something out and being so anxious because, oh my god, they're staring at me processing for 5 minutes. I'm obviously inconveniencing them. So like, yeah, we're pressured and traumatized into doing shit like this. Another thing is like looking in the mirror and practicing facial expressions and body language and mannerisms to try to appear normal and neurotypical, and trying to look in the mirror, do this specific thing, and then look away from the mirror, try to memorize exactly how my muscles feel and the way it feels to do this mannerism or this facial expression or whatever, and try to mirror it without looking at the mirror, and then look to see if I've done it right, if that makes sense. And it's just like, we spend so much energy and so much time just trying to do things the way neurotypical people do it and trying to appear neurotypical so that we're not unsafe or ridiculed or bullied for our natural state of being. Another huge way that I mask that is absolutely so harmful to me, but it's so difficult for me to get myself to stop doing it because it's just so ingrained in me, and it's something that I have been like subconsciously trained to do my entire life. So like consciously trying to untrain myself to do these things, so difficult. But I will constantly like just pretend that I'm fine, pretend that I'm okay, pretend that I don't need to be accommodated in situations where I am so overstimulated, just because I don't want to be an inconvenience or a nuisance or a burden to the people around me, because I've always been made to feel like that's what I am to people around me. I have notes so I don't forget to say anything, so that's what this paper is. But because I was always told that I was being dramatic or selfish or just gotta be different. Peyton's always gotta be different is something I heard all the fucking time. Like, that's a bad thing. But because of that, because I was made to feel so guilty for just being who I naturally am, my autistic child self, because that's when I was trained to do all of this and like trained to mask and hide my autistic traits, was when I was a fucking child, and made to feel like I was a burden to everybody around me, like the people that are supposed to be taking care of me. I was made to feel like I was a burden. So yeah, I was traumatized into masking and hiding my autistic traits. And so I would, over time, ignore my body's warning signs. And like when I became overstimulated and just not okay in general, if I became overstimulated or overwhelmed for anything, I was just gaslit into believing that I was being dramatic. Like, no, that's not how you feel, Peyton. You're just being a selfish brat. Like, suck it up. So I masked the fact that I was struggling, and I hid it, and I pretended that I was fine, and acted as neurotypical as possible and fooled everyone around me, because I didn't get diagnosed until I was 19. So clearly, I mean, nobody fucking suspected it. Nobody even like thought, hey, maybe we should get her evaluated. There could be something going on. Like, no. The sun has come out to play. Oh my god. Go back behind the clouds. Like, for example, I would be overstimulated all of the time, and I would just, after being gaslit for so long into believing that I was just being a selfish brat, I gaslit myself into believing that, like, no, you're not overwhelmed, you're not overstimulated, you're just being a selfish brat, suck it up, get over it. So that's what I did. I just internalized it and pretended that I was fine. And when I was really sitting there struggling to process everyone's words and what was going on around me because of all of the noise and the lights and the people and the overstimulation, and I was just sitting there like, yeah, haha, not processing anything that anyone is fucking saying, just trying to appear as okay as possible, and like not really processing anything around me because my focus was just make it look like you're fine, make it look like you're fine, make it look like you're not struggling, make it look like you're fine anytime I was around anyone, because I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to be an inconvenience to anybody, because that's all I was ever made to feel like.
Morgan, you have to answer people when they talk to you. I'm trying, but I can't talk right now. I don't understand why you're asking me to do something that I can't do. Morgan, are you even listening to me right now? Stop it. You can't do that in public. People are going to think it's weird and it's inappropriate. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll stop. Morgan, you have to look people in the eye when they're talking to you. But I can't listen to what people are saying when I'm trying to focus on looking them in the eye. I don't like doing that. I don't care. You have to figure it out. It's rude not to look people in the eye. Why do you always look just so miserable? I'm not miserable. I'm happy right now. You never make any expressions. It's really weird. Morgan, go play with the other kids. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what to do. Just go pretend. See that girl over there? Go follow her. Do whatever she does.
Like, if I'm too overstimulated to walk into Walmart, no, the fuck you're not, suck it up, go in there. So I would just kind of just shut down and could dissociate and walk through Walmart. Or if I had to go to a cousin's birthday party, but I was way too overstimulated to do anything or process anything, I would just dissociate and try to pretend like I was fine. And I probably looked like a fucking zombie most of the time because I was so dissociated and just not in reality, because I couldn't bear to be in reality because I was so burnt out and exhausted and overstimulated. But I tried my damnedest to make it look like I was fine. When it comes to food, I have extreme sensory sensitivities when it comes to like textures and shit, especially in my mouth. And so that made it extremely difficult for me to just like find food that I could survive off of as a child, especially dealing with the people around me who treated me like I was a burden anytime I asked for food. They were like, go eat the stale bread, expired milk, or can of chickpeas in the fucking cabinet, because that's all we had in the fucking house. And like, what the fuck are chickpeas? I still don't know. But yeah, anytime I was like, can we go get food from the store, or like go through a drive-through or something, or could you cook me something? It's like, you ate 9 hours ago. Why do you need to eat again? Like, you're so annoying. You're such a burden. And like, people would get short-tempered and irritable with me just for like asking for to get my basic needs met as a fucking child. And so I would just like go days, or like not days, I probably ate almost every day, but like I would go hours without eating, like without even mentioning that I was hungry, because I would rather go hungry than deal with feeling like a burden for asking for food, which really sucked. But that's a form of masking. Like, I hid that I was struggling. I pretended that I was fine. I pretended that I wasn't hungry, just so I wouldn't inconvenience anybody else. I struggled in silence for other people's convenience, because I was made to feel like I had to. Or another one, if I was like served food at like a family member's house or something and I didn't want to appear rude, I didn't want to appear ungrateful. So instead of being like, I appreciate this, but I can't get this down because of my sensory sensitivities, because I didn't have the words to say that. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I was made to believe that I was a selfish, inconsiderate brat. When I was just autistic and trying so hard to not inconvenience everyone around me, but still, it was never good enough. But if I was at a family member's house and they served something that I like had a texture that I couldn't stand, I would just kind of like pick at it, make it look like I was eating it, or just like kind of bear it as much as I could and get a few bites down, just so it looked like I was grateful for it, even though like I was so grateful that somebody like took the time to make me food. I just physically could not get that shit down because of the texture. Like, it's not your fault, it's not my fault. I can't do this. Like, I'm sorry. And I wish I could have communicated that, but I would have just gotten in trouble for it. So like, guys, we need to learn more about autism and stop treating our autistic children and just autistic people in general like this, because it's so fucked up. Also, another way that I would mask would just be like studying interactions between other people, just like watching people at school interact and like trying to figure out how I can mimic that to appear normal, because for some reason I never came off as normal to anybody, and I didn't know why. So I was just constantly trying to like mimic other people's social interactions that I saw on TV shows and on movies and on videos, and I would like watch a specific scene over and over again, or a specific clip in a video over and over again, trying to get this specific mannerism down, or this specific tone of voice, or a specific dialogue, anything. It was just, I would study human interaction so I knew how to act like a human, because I didn't feel like a human. I don't know if I already said this, but not every autistic person can mask or even wants to mask, because it can be super detrimental to the autistic person's mental health, because it takes so much extra energy to constantly put on this mask and just act like a completely different person 24/7, and put all of this energy into appearing normal constantly, and it contributes a lot to my burnout personally, which is why I'm trying so hard to slowly, consciously unmask. But that's so difficult to unlearn, like I said, after having these behaviors and ideologies ingrained in me since I was like a toddler. But on one hand, it can be incredibly detrimental. On the other, it can be necessary at times, because people can get very angry and aggressive just because of simple misunderstandings sometimes. Like, I had this interaction with this person that I was hanging out with, and He asked me how I was one day when I was at his house, and he was clearly very like upset and like irritated, so I didn't really know whether or not to ask him back how he was doing, because I didn't know if like he wanted me to, or if he was just gonna get angry for me asking like such a stupid question when he's obviously not good. So I was just like, good, and I was sitting there trying to process whether or not to ask back, and he just got like so angry immediately because I didn't ask him back like immediately. And so I just like left, and for years after this dude like harassed me, because he like lived in the same apartment complex as me, so he would like harass me and scream at me and yell like obscure profanities at me across the parking lot. He got so many complaints, and the cops called on him multiple times just because the neighbors were fed up with him screaming across the parking lot all the damn time. But yeah, I dealt with that until I moved a couple months ago. So yeah, just like simple interactions like that, people can go the fuck off and like switch in a second. And or personally, I at least have a very difficult time seeing when that switch is going to happen, because it just seems to happen out of the blue so often. So yeah, I mean, it can be incredibly necessary to mask in those moments, and just instead of trying to process like I did and being my autistic self, which I didn't know I was autistic at that time, but if I had been able to like mask in that moment and just ask it back immediately, and it might have gone better. He might not have been angry at me, and I might not have been harassed for 2.5 years after that. I don't know, but that's just like one example. But it can be detrimental. It can lead to burnouts, meltdowns, shutdowns. Just, it can be incredibly damaging to the autistic person's mental health in general. Now, while for some it's completely subconscious, and I think that's kind of like the majority, I think masking is usually a subconscious thing, or at least starts as a subconscious thing. And I personally became, and I'm still becoming, more aware of all of the ways in which I mask. But I will say, because I am more aware of it, sometimes I will consciously do it, especially just around people that I don't feel comfortable or safe with. Especially just in like brief interactions, if I'm like checking out at the grocery store or in line at the bank or something. I'm obviously like masking my hardest in those moments, because I'm around people I don't know, and I don't feel safe or comfortable with, because like I can't feel safe and comfortable with strangers in public, like obviously. But it is mostly subconscious, and I feel like I don't think I've ever fully unmasked around anyone. If I'm being completely honest, I cannot just like be my fully unmasked authentic self around anyone, because there's just no one in my life that I feel that comfortable or safe around, or ever have. And hopefully that changes, maybe it will. But I've never had that experience. I've never been that close to anyone, unfortunately. Now, there are people that I mask like way less around, like my best friend I mask way less around. Children I tend to mask less around, just because they tend to be less judgmental in certain ways, and more judgmental in others. So, you know, two-sided coin on that one. Also, autistic people and neurodivergent people are not the only ones that mask. Neurotypical people do it too. For one example, there's something I call phone voice, and it's when somebody's on the phone and their like voice goes up like 3 decibels. I swear to God, their voice just gets so much more high pitched, and they try to sound like more polite and like, I don't know, people pleasey and shit. And I find it funny, especially when I was a kid. I would call people out on that shit all the time and be like, why does your voice change so much when you're talking to a stranger on the phone? Like, that's not how you sound. And as I got older, I do it too now at this point, but it's just like, that's not what you sound like. But that's a form of masking, because you want to sound your politest and your nicest and your best on the phone with this random stranger that's robocalling you. I don't know, but like I definitely do that if like my doctor calls me or something, and I feel like most people do that, but that's a form of masking. Another one would be like in a professional work environment, or like with your boss. You're not gonna act like with your boss like you would with your best friend at home, right? Like you're gonna be more professional and more work appropriate. That's a form of masking. You're not being your full authentic self at work because you want to come off as appropriate. That's masking. The difference with autistic masking and neurotypical masking is usually autistic people tend to do it more, but also autistic people tend to do it for different reasons than neurotypical people. Like neurotypical people will do it to sound more professional in a work environment or on the phone with their doctor, but an autistic person will do that just to seem socially acceptable, like in any environment, in any social gathering, like when they're just hanging out with their friends, when they're at school, when they're in a checkout line, when they're going through the drive-through, like if they're going for a jog alone and somebody jogs past them, they might change the way that they run, or just like look away, or like avoid eye, like they might do anything that they wouldn't normally do if they didn't feel the need to appear socially acceptable to that person that can see them or perceive them or hear them or whatever it may be. But every autistic person is different because it's a spectrum. We have to remember that. And I've heard people ask the question like, well, if it's a spectrum, then how do you have like a diagnostic criteria? Like if everybody does all of these things, if every autistic trait is just a human trait, then how is everybody not autistic? Well, let me answer that. It has to do with how many autistic traits that you have. Like if you have 1 or 2 autistic traits, you might not be autistic. Like there are a lot of crossover traits with other disorders, and neurodevelopmental disabilities and stuff. But if you find yourself relating to a bunch of different traits from different autistic creators, or things that you found online, or however you've studied or done your research, if you find yourself relating to multiple autistic traits, then you might have something to look into. But masking is a huge reason that we go underdiagnosed, we being autistic people in general, because a lot of us don't let you see our struggles. We hide them and we suffer in silence. And no matter how hard we try, it's never good enough. You still see us as different, and it's always at our own expense. And I think that's another reason that a lot of people think that people are faking autism and shit, because like they don't see the autistic traits because they're not with this autistic person 24/7, and they don't see the struggles and detriments that they're going through behind closed doors. So next time you know somebody that gets diagnosed with autism, or even suspects that they're autistic and doesn't have the formal diagnosis, because it is so difficult to get a clinical diagnosis, especially in the US. I don't know about other countries because I'm not in other countries, but next time somebody that you know discovers that they have autism, maybe don't accuse them of faking it just because you don't see their struggles. But anyway, if you guys related to any of this, let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your support, and have a blessed day. Lace the fuck up.
When you've spent your entire life being told you're too sensitive, too dramatic, so loud, so annoying, so selfish, so bossy, so rude, so cold, and you always feel like you've never been understood, and you're constantly trying to understand others, but you never quite get it, and no matter how many friends you have, you never feel like you belong anywhere and you don't fit in, then you create this mask to fit into a mold that you're never meant to fit into, and you think everybody is struggling and feeling like you. Then you find out that you have autism and ADHD as an adult, and everything makes sense. And in that moment, it's not just a label. It is an explanation for why you are the way that you are. And you learn that you aren't a bad person, and you're not cold, and you're not bossy. You just needed structure and love and understanding, and everybody missed it your entire life. That is where you come in, and you need to love yourself and accept yourself and teach other people and help them understand you and understand yourself, because your self-esteem has been affected so dramatically, and your self-worth, and you learn to unmask, and you learn that who you are is wonderful. You are wonderful, you're magnificent, and your brain is brilliant.